In the century of the internet, there's just no way that we are still dealing with the concept of writer's block, as if it's a real boogeyman and a real problem in the writing community. And it truly is a boogeyman that seemingly attacks anyone at any level of writing, whether you're in publication, you're a professional now, or you're an amateur, it just happens. And I believe that this has to end. Because of the internet, we have so many options of creativity, of inspiration. And I do not mean this in an abstract manner, where you're going on a trip and you find something or find someone or have a conversation with somebody on that trip and then you get inspired. Not to say that that is not a valid way of gaining inspiration, but it is for a small minority, redundant, but it is for a minority of people to not only have the time but the resources as well to go out and be inspired that way. And even more dangerous is if you do go out and yet you are not inspired. And so we have more concrete ways of inspiring ourselves in the age of the internet. And so what I'm alluding to is the existence of tropes, and more accurately, the ability to search for these tropes on the internet, whether it's through watching a YouTube video or searching for articles on TV tropes. And so with that, we have to discuss what is the purpose of a trope in writing, because there's a purpose for it when like the reader or the audience is seeing it and say, oh, that is a trope. But when you're a writer, what does it mean for you? And what it means for you is basically inspiration, something not only to move forward, but also to help break out of the writer's block. And so why do I believe this? It's because of my recent endeavors of reading stories from the publishing company Shonen Jump, or was it a magazine? Let's just say the magazine Shonen Jump. And so what you'd notice when you read a lot of their works is that they use each other's tropes. And so what you'll have is that they may create tropes, and then obviously future writers, or even in some cases, writers who are currently still creating their works, redundant again, are using tropes that were created by their peers. And so what you have is that in real time they're creating tropes, and within the same company the others use those tropes as well, which is obvious. It's the whole chocolate company example, where while that company can have many different flavors, like put nuts in the chocolate, they could make mint chocolate, but fundamentally the chocolate from that factory, regardless of the different flavors that they make, still tastes similar. There's still distinct taste that belongs to that company specifically. And so of course the same is true when it comes to stories and writing that come from one company, or magazine in this case. And that similarity should be expected, because if all the stories come from one company and you expect something completely different or new, is kind of counterintuitive to what, or rather how companies work in the first place. But other than that, the fact that these authors take the tropes and use them, and it's not to say that they just take and use them, copy and paste, but this is where writing, or even your writing comes in, your writing ability comes in, because now you have to take something that already exists and make it your own. And so that also makes it interesting for readers, because now they have to read the story beyond the superficial aspect of the story, which is something that you would hope is done in a general sense, because if you are reading a story or judging in terms of like critiquing a story, your critique of a story shouldn't sound like somebody told you about the story rather than you reading it for yourself. An example of what I mean is, and I'm sure you've encountered this before, if somebody is telling you that a story is very tropey, and then they try to discuss with you the quality of the show, and the way they go about doing so is by naming the said tropes. And so what you'll hear is things like, oh, people won with the power of friendship. The journey is what matters and not the destination. The mentor died. And so I hope you know what I'm talking about. They talk to you about the story in the most superficial sense. And then they act as if that is a fundamentally bad thing. Criticism should not sound like that. Critique should be looking underneath that layer and should be more concerned with the whys. So why in this specific story did the mentor die? How or why did they win with the power of friendship? Why is it that the journey is factually more important than the destination? It's not about the fact that it was done, but it's about the reasons why it was done. You can even go as far as to ask, what is the power of friendship in this series, according to its world building, the lore? And so it's about judging the story more based off of the merits of writing. And so a quick example of this would be the Naruto series, and two concepts that build upon each other in the series, which is the one that Haku taught Naruto, which is that if he's defending somebody he loves, then he'll become strong as he needs to be. And then there's the concept of the will of fire and the will of stone, which are all basically the same thing and build upon each other. And so trope-wise, this is the power of friendship, but the way Kishimoto writes it is making it his own and making it an integral part of the series. And so you see this a lot in Shonen Jump, where they take these tropes and get inspiration for other plot ideas from previous shows. But then what you see is that they heavily remix it to fit their own series, to the point that you cannot divorce that trope from the show without essentially taking away a major part of that show that is important. And so because we have so many examples of them doing that, of these authors doing that, I believe that it's a good lesson for all authors or writers, specifically run into writer's block, since it's very important for all of us to know that there's no such thing as original ideas when it comes to writing, or even something that is seemingly unique, because of the fact that that is a very subjective term. Because seemingly unique, you can't account for what the audience has read before. And so you might be patting yourself on the back for creating something that you've never seen before, but then you'll have somebody say, oh, I've seen that before, and it was from some Danish author. If you're an English speaker, that means that you might never have read that story before, because you wouldn't have been able to understand it. It was never translated. Or it was an Estonian author, a Kenyan author. It could have been something totally foreign to you from the perspective of the English world, and yet that story exists. And so in that sense, it's very important to humble yourself and understand that there's always going to be a story that is basically like yours, whether it's in terms of plot or themes. And so this is not an inherently bad thing, but it's actually a very good thing that there are no original stories or things of that nature, because what it really points to is that human beings essentially go through the same things and wonder about the same things. And that's usually the fundamental basis as to why you can find your community or fans of your work all around the world. However strange your story may be, it really is more of a testament to human beings' ability to connect with each other, regardless of cultural differences. It's just as Saul says from One Piece, that no one was born to be alone, and that means more in the world of writing. And so taking and using these tropes can be liberating, because we no longer have to have this mental block. We can simply assess where we are in the story, or maybe the character's journey, or the world building itself, and go through a list of tropes and see which ones would actually help move your plot forward, or what would be a good way to take your character's journey forward. And then you do the hard work of making that trope work in your story. This video is getting a bit long, so in the future I'll try to make a video where I'll have proper examples from the different stories in Shonen Jump that definitely use the exact same trope. But what you see is that these tropes are heavily remixed to work in those series and usually have unique uses in those series. But with that being said, I don't believe that there really is a reason for us to be scared of this concept of writer's block that creatively bankrupts us all, especially in the century of the internet. And so with that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.